A dozen years ago, I was minding my own business, teaching Economics 101 in Alexander Hall, and thinking of good excuses for avoiding faculty meetings. Then I got a phone call.
Ben Bernanke has chaired the Federal Reserve Board since 2006. He's expected to step down when his second term ends early next year, leaving a new Fed leader with some difficult decisions. This is Annie Lowry for the New York Times.
Economics is a highly sophisticated field of thought that is superb at explaining to policymakers precisely why the choices they made in the past were wrong. About the future, not so much.
Scholars and policy thinkers from both sides of the aisle have credited his aggressive and creative policy making with helping to avert a second depression. He pushed interest rates down to zero, created an alphabet soup of programs to help troubled banks, and has bought trillions of dollars of assets to spur investment.
We are currently purchasing $40 billion per month in agency MBS and $45 billion per month in treasuries.
It will be up to his successor to unwind the Fed's extraordinary support for an economy that is still weak. Orchestrating the taper or reducing the Fed's pace of asset purchases will be one of the biggest challenges. Even mentioning the word taper has sent jitters through the markets already.
More generally, with the recovery still proceeding at only a moderate pace, the economy remains vulnerable to unanticipated shocks, including the possibility that global economic growth may be slower than currently anticipated.
Bernanke's successor will also have to make a decision about the tone he or she sets as chairman. Bernanke has been very consensus-focused. He also introduced a new policy of openness and transparency, for instance, holding routine press conferences.
I'd like to begin by welcoming our guest to the Federal Reserve.
That's been a stark departure from Alan Greenspan, who helmed the central bank from 1987 to 2006.
I would engage in some form of syntax destruction, which sounded as though I were answering the question, but in fact had not.
That's Greenspan describing his famed vague Fed speak. Granted, Bernanke hasn't always been easy to understand either.
The 7, 6.5, these are guideposts that tell you how we're going to be shifting the mix of our tools as we try to land this ship on in a smooth way onto the aircraft carrier.
So far, there are two leading contenders for the job. Larry Summers, President Obama's former economic policy advisor, would likely be a chairman more in the Greenspan mold. Janet Yellen, the vice chairwoman at the Fed, is likely to continue with Bernanke's commitment to open dialogue and a focus on the board rather than its chair. But the two hold a similarly dovish outlook. They're both very worried about unemployment and less concerned about the risks from inflation, so they would likely have a similar approach to the taper. Fed watchers say Bernanke's successor probably won't have as difficult a tenure as Bernanke himself. But for the new chairman or chairwoman, the road will be far from easy, trying to set policy with unemployment still uncomfortably high.
The Federal Reserve Chairman is not just one of the most important economic policymakers in America. He or she is one of the most important policymakers in the world. And that person presumably will stay on after I'm president.